Today is Saturday, June 17th, 2023. I am here to share wisdom with all of us who have yet to realize the truth, those whose hearts are still clouded by ignorance. It is essential to listen to this recording regularly. For those who have listened from the very first recording to this final one, you have done something truly commendable. You will gain insight into every aspect of seeing things as they truly are. You will come to understand the teachings of the Buddha, leading to genuine freedom from suffering, true liberation from ignorance, and release from the cycle of birth and death. This could be the last lifetime for all of us. Listening to the essence of truth and cultivating wisdom is profoundly important. It is the very heart of the matter. In the Buddha's time, he also shared the Dhamma through spoken teachings, offering guidance to those who were unaware of the essence of his teachings. During that era, people predominantly followed Brahmanical traditions and were captivated by rituals, worship, and offerings. They were often misled by religions focused solely on the pursuit of pleasure and worldly happiness. Through listening to the Dharma teachings, wisdom gradually develops within us. Those who haven't yet understood these principles should note this well. Our minds lack only wisdom, which is why we get lost in suffering and attachments. If you understand this, regularly listen to teachings about the mind. This knowledge isn't visible to the eye, but is known through the heart, guided by those who have seen truth clearly. When teachers share these lessons, seek them out and learn. Don't let such precious opportunities pass by unused. Even in the Buddha's time, many did not have the chance to hear his teachings. Among those who did encounter the Buddha, some ignored him and paid no attention to his Dhamma. This reflects the ignorance and foolishness inherent in the minds of beings, a blindness that keeps them trapped in suffering. Some get lost in various practices. Without guidance from wise teachers, we practice from a place of ignorance rather than wisdom. True teaching focuses solely on the mind and its workings. Everything else is external, merely the outer shell of truth. When you hear genuine teachings about the mind, you may find them strange, yet remarkable, unlike anything you've heard before. This is the authentic Dharma, teachings that feel new to our understanding. This is not about practicing Dhamma by walking, standing, sitting slowly, or maintaining awareness of physical movements in a ritualistic manner. Such practices, visible to the eye, are worldly forms of Dhamma, traditions passed down over time. Walking this way, sitting that way, dressing in certain colors, moving slowly, eating slowly, and staying in seclusion are considered practices of discipline, but they are still the outer shell of Dhamma. These observable behaviors that we learn through our senses and imitate are forms of superstition, not the essential truth. Remember, true Dhamma is about the mind, its nature and its workings. Keep this in mind. The essence of Dhamma is the mind. Giving in this world often involves offering material things in exchange for merit, giving money to monks, offering food to monks, or providing food or money to the poor. These acts, while commonly called merit, hold no real difference in value. They are considered good deeds, but they are not the essence of the Buddha's teachings. They are merely the outer shell, worldly teachings that would exist even without the Buddha. During the Buddha's time, the Brahmins performed similar acts of giving within their caste system, believing that offerings to certain groups brought greater merit. For example, they would make offerings to members of the Sudra or Kshatriya castes, thinking it yielded more spiritual rewards. These practices became traditions, specific rituals on certain days, showing reverence to certain groups such as kings or Brahmins, or those who practiced extreme asceticism like fasting or living naked. These were widely believed to generate merit and were even recorded in ancient scriptures. People blindly followed these practices, thinking they were virtuous, but such beliefs are rooted in tradition and ritual, not the profound truth. This is not the teaching the Buddha aimed to impart. Acts like doing good, refraining from wrong, or sharing and helping others, though commonly called merit, are considered good deeds even without religions. These are worldly concepts of goodness passed down through generations, learned, remembered, and believed without deeper understanding. As Luang Pu Dan taught, beyond mind there is no other Dharma, mind itself is Dharma. Beyond Dharma there is no other Dharma. Beyond this mind, there is no other mind. This pure, radiant nature is inherent in all of us, flawless and beyond comparison. We must listen deeply to these teachings about the mind, repeatedly, until insight dawns. Many who hear this message reach understanding, their doubts dissolve, and they find true ease in living. The nature of consciousness, as understood in the context of sentient beings, is fundamentally rooted in not knowing. This consciousness relies on accumulated knowledge from each incarnation. Like in this human life, we gather both virtuous and non-virtuous experiences, both wholesome and unwholesome actions, including our spiritual practice. Yet, as long as we haven't awakened to the ultimate truth, all this knowledge remains clouded by fundamental ignorance. This is what we call the mind of living beings. No matter how much it practices, as long as ignorance is in control, the mind lacks true wisdom. When a person dies, all the knowledge they gathered stays buried deep in the mind. But this knowledge is shallow and unclear, unable to truly help. However, there exists another kind of knowledge that we can actively cultivate and use in this lifetime, the knowledge called wisdom. This wisdom represents consciousness, understanding itself. When we say wisdom, we mean consciousness seeing consciousness, specifically seeing mental formations. This means being aware whenever we think, feel, or experience anything through our senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. We understand that all these experiences arise to be known, and whether delusion appears or not, we maintain awareness of how mental formations create thoughts and emotions. We start to see that all these thoughts and feelings are not really ours. They are just passing experiences, not permanent and not truly who we are. This understanding brings freedom. Nothing can be controlled. This body must age, sicken and die, uncontrollable. We must inevitably separate from all we love and cherish, uncontrollable. This mind fabricates by itself, thinking and feeling on its own, uncontrollable. Teach yourself this often. Observe emotions and thought formations frequently. This is what we call wisdom, panya. It's understanding born from seeing truth, arising as momentary insights. This kind of knowledge we call wisdom. Some develop refined concentration, becoming skilled in practice, gaining understanding of their own concentration, this understanding too is wisdom. Wisdom comes in many levels, from just 1% clarity to full comprehension at 100%. These insights become deeply embedded in the mind. What matters most is understanding, the key to unlocking deeper awareness and transformation. When we pass away from this human life, a well-trained mind, enriched with wisdom, carries that wisdom within itself. If such a mind is reborn as a human, it will often manifest as someone intelligent, fortunate, successful, and well-liked, someone who seems to attract good things and experiences prosperity in life. Though I speak in somewhat flattering terms, in reality it doesn't always work out so perfectly. Our nature involves both wholesome and unwholesome actions, so outcomes can vary. This explanation is simply to help us understand that the knowledge embedded in the mind through wisdom has the potential to grow further. Once wisdom is imprinted in the mind, it continues to develop, unfolding naturally over time. In the past, practicing Dhamma was driven by memorization and rigid forms. It was about wearing white robes, walking back and forth, staying at a monastery, fasting, or following specific postures, sitting a certain way for extended periods, or strictly adhering to specific techniques. These practices were all about directing the mind outward, not toward the ultimate truth, and clung to the belief that this is the right way, because teachers have done it this way. If one didn't follow these methods, walking meditation, sitting meditation, chanting, fasting, or sleep deprivation, it was deemed incorrect. The idea was to endure pain, to conquer it, believing that doing so would lead to the realization of truth. I too memorized these approaches, as did many practitioners, but ultimately gained nothing. Only upon understanding the essence of Dharma did we realize it had nothing to do with what we previously understood. It is far beyond the forms and methods I once thought were indispensable. Humans are ruled by ignorance in their hearts. Thoughts and ideas arise from ignorance, from not knowing. Feelings of happiness or suffering also stem from ignorance. Walking meditation is done out of ignorance. Sitting meditation, chanting Buddha, or engaging in any practice is done out of ignorance. Even keeping precepts in a monastery comes from ignorance. Ignorance arises simply because of not knowing, because it resides in the mind. Ignorance is not knowing. Not knowing is foolishness, delusion. If we introduce knowledge, knowledge that is the truth, the reality that leads to awakening, ignorance will dissipate. When we maintain awareness continuously like this, ignorance gradually fades away until it completely vanishes. What remains is the natural state of awareness, awakened and radiant. This is the nature of the one who knows, the one who is awakened. It awakens through its very nature. This is what leads to wisdom. The way to guide the mind to awakening, according to the Buddha's teaching, is through the four foundations of mindfulness, Satipatthana. This was the method he taught to his disciples collectively. But there is also a special method that the Buddha transmitted to special individuals, guiding the mind directly to emptiness. This special approach lies outside the general teachings given to most disciples. This method liberates us from all suffering, developing wisdom. Before gaining wisdom, one must first perceive reality. seeing the conditioned phenomena repeatedly. Over time, this repeated observation leads to understanding. When understanding arises, it is called wisdom. When there is understanding, there is no doubt. Listen carefully to these words. We understand how consciousness takes birth, how it experiences suffering. The Buddha taught us to understand suffering. He proclaimed, "Only suffering arises, only suffering exists, only suffering ceases. Nothing else arises, nothing else ceases. No one, no thing truly comes into being in this world." Remember these words. No one, nothing truly arises in this world. We are not human beings, nor are we anything else. We are consciousness. Remember this. Therefore, do not mistake yourselves as being a person or a human. That is ignorance, avijja. As long as we continue to hold the notion that we are a person or a human, ignorance will rule our hearts, causing us to suffer from everything. The nature that constantly appears and disappears exists only in the present moment. This nature arises in the present and dissolves in the present perpetually. This nature is the mental formations of the mind, thoughts, emotions, and feelings. They appear and vanish in the present moment continuously. This is what we must awaken to, recognize, know, and see. The term awareness means being conscious of knowing, being aware that you are aware. When you become aware and realize, "I am aware," don't misunderstand it as there being a self or entity that is aware. It's not about someone being aware, but simply the state of awareness itself. Just recognize this. Awareness is happening. When we see thoughts and emotions arising, this is called being a knower of suffering, being diligent, following the Buddha's teaching, being one who will not be reborn. The ultimate truth, Sakadhamma, is simple. It resides solely in the mind. All you need to know is just this. There's no need to know too much. It's all about the mind. It's about awakening. Just stay aware. When thoughts arise, know them. When you speak, be aware of speaking. If this explanation makes you want to deliberately try to be aware, notice that desire. If effort arises, observe the effort as it appears and disappears in the present moment. When you see this effort clearly, you're preparing yourself for non-rebirth. It's guaranteed. When speaking happens, no speaking is happening. When inner speech occurs, no inner speech is occurring. If an image arises in the mind, be aware of it. That image is simply a thought. When emotions arise, whether joy, sadness, laughter, or calmness, just observe that emotion. If you're hungry, recognize hunger. If you crave coffee, know that craving. If you crave fruit, recognize that craving. There's no need to suppress or eliminate these natural conditions. Just observe them as they are, with equanimity. We're not prohibiting anything, just knowing. Know the nature of mental formations, not trying to stop them, simply knowing them as they are. The Buddha clearly stated, suffering should be understood. He did not say it should be extinguished. Those who merely notice their thoughts fading away and cling to the idea, when I know it disappears, are still ignorant. If someone teaches, once you realize it, the thought will vanish. Once you know it, it will be empty. There's no need to continue fabricating or clinging. This is an acceptable teaching. For some, awareness indeed leads to immediate stillness, and thoughts cease altogether. However, for beginners, it's crucial to understand that just simply to be aware. Repeated awareness gradually trains the mind to become familiar with awakening. When the mind experiences this awareness even once, it often feels surprising and extraordinary, giving rise to understanding. For some, this understanding arises instantly. For others, it manifests as a strange sensation, a sense of lightness, wonder, or even chills. These experiences are natural signs of Buddhahood beginning to emerge, an initial wisdom arising in the mind. They reflect the mind's first steps toward awakening and insight. It's not about forcefully extinguishing thoughts or suffering, but recognizing and observing them. When you first catch sight of a thought, emotion, or notice yourself speaking or laughing, seeing it right here in the present moment, a strange feeling arises, along with a tiny spark of understanding. Then naturally, by the mind's own nature, this awareness begins to occur more frequently. You observe your mental formations. Whether catching them in time or not isn't the point. Just keep observing continuously, and understanding will dawn. Ah, so this is what seeing thoughts is like. Even if the mind flows along with the thought afterward, there's still a moment of insight. Ah, I see. This is what a thought looks like. You might then notice, oh, I missed it again, or I almost caught it just now. That's fine. This incremental understanding deepens as you go, little by little. To cultivate this understanding, you should listen to my talks repeatedly. Over time, this awareness will develop automatically. It will become second nature. The mind that listens to Dhamma frequently is a mind that already possesses determination, Adhitthana parami, within itself. However, for those who lack this determination, or the supporting virtue of truthfulness, Sakka parami, they must consciously develop it. This can be done by making a firm resolution. Visualize the Buddha before you and make this heartfelt vow. From this moment forward, I will diligently listen to this Dharma, will be awakened to observe my mind and see my thoughts. I will not be reborn again, will realize this nature. This will be my final birth. May the Buddha be my witness. May I succeed and attain the Dhamma instantly. As you observe your thoughts, you'll begin to notice them. There's no need to force or train yourself to awaken. Awakening doesn't require effort or control. That approach belongs to outdated teachings, which involve unnecessary struggle. Instead, simply observe and allow the mind to awaken by itself. This is the natural path of the mind's unfolding. Teaching through force is like parents pressuring their children to do homework or household chores immediately after school. The child resists and the parents insist. The result, both sides suffer. This stems from ignorance, avijja, a lack of understanding, and a reliance on force and emotions. If instead, parents lead by example, engage in open conversations, use humor and work alongside their children, the child will feel joy and naturally want to participate without coercion. This approach embodies wisdom, reason, and compassion. By understanding the child's mind and teaching with empathy, the family can enjoy happiness together. Our own mind is much the same. Forcing it leads to suffering. The old generation of teachers often taught by forcing the mind, emphasizing control and suppression. However, the Buddha never taught us to force the mind. let me tell you that. The Buddha said these extreme practices, we've tried them all, they're not the way. The Buddha taught with wisdom, guiding his followers to understand. Those who truly understood his teachings attained enlightenment right away. The Buddha never said, first you must keep precepts, or go meditate in a specific way, in a specific place. He didn't prescribe extreme practices like sitting next to a tiger to overcome fear. The Buddha never taught these things because they are extreme approaches born out of ignorance, not wisdom. Many old teachers relied on such methods, and we followed them out of habit, becoming practitioners who lack wisdom. These methods depend on force, forcing the mind not to think, forcing it not to feel emotions, forcing it to only feel happy, forcing it not to feel anger, or not to curse or get upset with anyone. They taught us to force the mind not to think about this or that, to think only of Buddha or solely about the Buddha. It became a practice based entirely on control, suppressing thoughts, feelings and behaviors, turning the mind into a battleground of constant coercion. But such methods lead to exhaustion, not liberation. When we strive in giving, we suffer. In moral discipline, we suffer. In meditation, we suffer even more. All because we try to force the mind into concentration. When it won't concentrate, we suffer. When we sit long hours with physical pain, we suffer. All this suffering comes from forcing, which reflects the mind's fundamental confusion. About 98% of beings operate this way, trying to control the mind without understanding its true nature. The Buddha experimented with all forms of mental control until he saw their futility. Only when he released control did enlightenment dawn. True practice should feel natural and at ease. When we find this ease, awakening comes naturally. We haven't reached enlightenment because we keep trying to control the mind, creating suffering for both the controller and what's being controlled. It's like parents forcing their children. Both parents and children suffer, eventually leading to separation and ill will. This all stems from lacking wisdom in guidance. Without wise guidance, children seek learning elsewhere, often with unexpected results that lead to greater difficulties. Our mind is just like that, exactly the same. We must come to understand this. Just as nature flows according to its own rhythm, our path to freedom from suffering and the cycle of rebirth begins with letting the mind be at its most comfortable state. This means allowing it to function freely. Let it think. Let it remember according to its patterns. Let it experience both happiness and sadness as thoughts arise. Allow the mind to flow according to its own causes and conditions. Never force the mind. Our only role is to be aware, to observe how the mind creates and forms thoughts. Whatever it conjures up, simply know and watch. Regularly teach yourself. Teach the mind, not through force, but through reason and wisdom. This is wise reflection, teaching your own heart through mindful contemplation. I've been trying to teach myself to understand and observe what happens in my mind, so I can get a clearer picture of it. I started by noticing my own thoughts. Once I began to see them, it was as if they were constantly present no matter what I was doing. For example, while talking to a friend, I'd suddenly remember to observe my thoughts. Even when sitting still, I could see myself thinking about something. When eating, I'd observe my actions, chewing, tasting the delicious flavors, or even noticing when my mind wandered and got lost in various thoughts. Most of the time, I started by observing my thoughts because they occur every moment. Even during meals, I wasn't fully present with eating. My thoughts would drift to the past, the future, or unrelated things in the present. As I kept observing, I realized that thoughts are always at work. You can't force them to stop. They just keep going as if that's their job. I began to look at them with a sense of humor, telling myself, wow, these thoughts sure are hard workers. When you start to see your thoughts, you become aware. Oh, I'm thinking right now. But often you don't even realize you're caught up in thoughts. This process deepens your understanding. It shows that thoughts are just something that happens, not something you can control. But when I reached this point, I still had questions. If thoughts can't be controlled, how can we truly understand them? Or does the goal mean stopping all thoughts entirely? Is that the end of the process? These questions remain with me, and they're part of what I continue to learn as I explore this path. When you simply observe your thoughts without engaging, analyzing, or trying to control them, it might seem like nothing is happening. The mind becomes quiet, and you may wonder if this leads to anything meaningful or insightful. These doubts are natural and a good sign. This simplicity is the essence of Dharma practice. True practice doesn't require you to become someone special, ordain, follow strict rules, or isolate yourself in a retreat. It's not about forcing yourself into meditation postures or extreme fasting. The core of practice is being aware of your thoughts and letting them be. When you consistently observe your mind like this, it's the essence of ethical conduct, sila, concentration, samadhi, and insight, panya. Awareness of the mind's activities is a form of sila, moral discipline. When the mind remains awake and stable, even for a moment, this is samadhi, concentration. A stable awareness sustained over time develops into jhana, absorption, becoming more refined the longer it is maintained. There's no need to strive for these states. They arise naturally from awareness. The more often you observe your thoughts, the more understanding, yoniso manasikara, develops. Gradually, this awareness deepens bit by bit, leading to profound clarity and wisdom. When you begin to see and understand frequently, ignorance and doubt naturally start to diminish. This is how wisdom arises, the highest merit in spiritual practice. No other merit surpasses wisdom. Let me share this truth. In its essence, this path isn't about external things. It's about the original mind, pure and pristine, empty yet luminous, beyond comparison or description. However, to convey this concept, we use conventional terms. The simple act of being aware and awake within yourself, this is true practice. It's essential to truly understand this. Never force the mind. Avoid the common mistake of trying to control everything, whether it's your mind, your children, your spouse, or others, driven by anger or frustration. This only leads to stress and suffering. Letting go of control and being aware is the key to freeing yourself from suffering and cultivating true understanding. The mind that reaches enlightenment must be light, at ease, letting go and present in the moment. It's not about control or forcing things to be a certain way. Forcing the mind is an exhausting method that yields no true results. As masters like Luang Por Put taught, after intensive practice, what emerged was mindfulness, not from training or force, but arising naturally from understanding. When the mind understands its own nature, awareness awakens naturally. True practice is simply observing, being aware, and letting everything flow according to its nature. This awakened mind is the foundation of morality, concentration, and wisdom. Enlightenment isn't complicated. It's about being mindful, aware, and releasing attachment. The mind will naturally progress toward true understanding. Awareness is the mind itself. Let me tell you, it will awaken by itself, naturally. It will happen on its own. You cannot train or force it to arise. Masters who have realized truth understand nature's reality deeply, yet many teach through traditional strict methods, sometimes losing sight of Dharma's essence. The Buddha himself tried extreme asceticism before discovering it couldn't lead to liberation. Enlightenment is simple. It starts with letting the mind be light and at ease. No forcing, just being aware in the present. If desire arises, know there's desire. If effort arises, know there's effort. Don't force awareness, simply observe gently, without attachment. Listen to Dharma with a relaxed mind. Understanding naturally flows. Watch thoughts without control. It doesn't matter if awareness is quick or slow, just be with what is. As the mind begins to understand, it realizes that even not being quick enough is present moment awareness. This understanding is wisdom's beginning. With clear present awareness, ease and understanding gradually deepen until transformation occurs. Buddha nature emerges freely, doubts end, leading to liberation. The Buddha taught that suffering has causes and our role is to simply know suffering. Understanding its causes allows us to let them go. This is the middle way, neither forcing the mind nor neglecting practice entirely. Listen to this teaching often and remain awake within yourself. Do not let your mind follow its fabrications or wander. This is the essence of what the Buddha clearly taught. I have simplified the explanation to help you understand. Be mindful in a relaxed way, without forcing, suppressing, or striving. Correct practice lies in the middle way. The mind and mental formations are natural phenomena that function on their own. They are not you nor yours. Do not cling to or control them. Simply know and understand that these natural processes exist independently, like the wind blowing, water flowing, seasons changing, or life arising and passing away. Just observe reality as it is, without attaching any personal significance. When you understand the true nature of the mind in this way, wisdom and insight will arise, eventually leading to the state of an awakened being. Be brave enough to let go of thoughts, emotions, and all forms of practice. Allow nature to flow freely. This is the characteristic of a mind beginning to enter the path of an awakened being, Arya Pugala, and it will refine itself progressively toward the state of arahantship. For those still attached to forms or scriptures, it is essential to let go of prior knowledge to make room for true understanding. This act of letting go is crucial. It marks the beginning of awakening and liberation. Consider this. The practice of Dharma is meant for letting go, yet many become attached to forms, to identities, to wearing white robes, to keeping precepts, and to the belief that precepts are a fixed entity. These attachments are things we impose on ourselves. This simple truth shouldn't need teaching, but I share it because my role is to guide and offer perspectives to help you find freedom from suffering. When you observe your thoughts and emotions and listen to these teachings regularly, you will gradually learn to teach yourself. This self-teaching is crucial, but it's something that most, around 70%, still struggle with, relying heavily on teachers for guidance. The remaining 30% are those who begin to teach themselves. They listen to Dharma often, observe their own thoughts, and come to understand the nature of the mind. These individuals have wisdom, strong self-discipline, and qualities that make them more naturally inclined toward awakening. So, listen to this talk frequently, observe your thoughts, and practice teaching yourself. This is the path to freedom from suffering. Try to notice, when watching our thoughts, we often get entangled with them. We wonder, why am I irritable today? Why do I feel uneasy watching my thoughts? Why do I still have these emotions? Or sometimes think, if I'm practicing correctly, shouldn't these emotions decrease? Why am I still angry? This is playing with thoughts. Even though we see the thoughts, we unknowingly elaborate on them. That's why I say, just know, don't elaborate. To do this requires skill, requires listening to Dharma and practicing until the mind becomes very refined. Those beginning to understand can start to see thoughts, but still have effort, wondering, why don't I see many thoughts today? Or, my mind feels fuzzy, my mindfulness is weak. Then elaborating that it might be from lack of sleep or not listening to enough Dharma. This is returning to mental fabrication. The key point is, when thinking or doubting, we often don't realize we're actually thinking. We get lost playing with thoughts, elaborating on doubts, believing what the mind creates. What we should do is recognize when we're thinking and stop elaborating. Just know simply, though this sounds easy, most people still get lost in thought, a characteristic of those with lesser wisdom. This practice takes time, but if we frequently listen to Dharma and observe our thoughts more, we'll gradually understand and develop true wisdom. We must grasp the key principle. When we realize, I created this thought myself, we understand what truly seeing thoughts means. It can be so clear it gives us goosebumps, bringing profound understanding. But once we understand, we often cling to that understanding as truth, feeling satisfied and thinking, now I get it. The problem is, after clearly seeing thoughts, we attach to that insight, claiming, I understand now. This is an even subtler form of playing with thoughts, making our understanding into a self-identity. We remain caught in thought patterns, even while believing we know better. True seeing of thoughts means not clinging to the seeing itself. Sometimes we get lost in the joy of seeing, feeling we understand and telling others, if you see like this, you'll be just like me. But this attachment to seeing is still playing with thoughts. This stage is called anagami, where we still cling to knowledge and seeing as self, even with deeper understanding. Unless we let go of attaching to this understanding, we remain caught in the cycle of mental formations. When we doubt or try to understand deeper Dharma, like doubting whether we fully know Dharma or questioning our ignorance, this excessive effort to understand can keep us attached to thoughts and mental formations, without seeing that right now we are thinking or trying to find answers ourselves. this is really just continuing to play with thoughts. Those who truly see present moment thoughts feel as if nothing remains, no self, no one, and no stories or concerns. The mind becomes empty, holding on to nothing. This is seeing the present moment truly, without attachment or fabrication, leading to a sense of emptiness that can sometimes bring tears because it feels like doing nothing at all. There's no self or me that needs to do anything. This is the characteristic of complete present moment awareness, not clinging to any thoughts or feelings, but truly recognizing that everything is its own natural way, with nothing to hold on to or control. When we truly understand Dharma, it doesn't lead to pride, boasting, or even joy in our understanding. If we still cling to our understanding or feel pleased about it, this shows we haven't reached the ultimate. Our mind might be at the anagami level, but hasn't achieved arahantship while still holding on to understanding as something we possess or are. Letting go of understanding doesn't mean trying to erase it. It means clearly seeing that nothing is truly us. Whether hearing sounds or comprehending thoughts, these occur naturally, not because we understand or control them. The mind perceives things naturally, and when it understands, it naturally releases its grip on thoughts and understanding. This is destroying ignorance or releasing attachment to ignorance, leading to wisdom that unravels attachments and lets things flow naturally. This arising of wisdom in the mind doesn't come from trying to understand, but from the mind naturally knowing that these things aren't ours and nothing needs to be done with them. This is natural liberation from ignorance. When ignorance breaks away, the mind naturally releases its grip on thoughts and feelings. This cannot be fully explained in words. It's an automatic, natural experience of the mind, freeing itself from attachment to self and thoughts. The mind knows by itself that there's nothing to possess or define, and the concept of self no longer applies. This is enlightenment, the cessation of perceptions and emotions that are mental constructs, with nothing remaining as me or mine to cling to. When Buddha nature arises, understanding Dharma reveals everything as convention. Thoughts are merely mental constructs using conventional language to explain, but the truth is pure and free beyond complete verbal description. At this level of understanding, we realize that mind or consciousness that knows everything is pure, aware without effort or attachment, naturally knowing and functioning by itself. We find it impossible to fully explain or tell others because what we know transcends words. It's an experience that arises and dissolves in the present moment, leaving nothing to hold on to or preserve. Everything flows naturally, freely, and purely. Knowing and mental formations arise and vanish simultaneously in the present moment, requiring no action. Everything exists in the present and naturally dissolves there. When we speak of doing nothing, some might misinterpret it as complete inaction, but it means that when we truly understand ultimate truth, it manages itself. Everything flows naturally, without need for forcing or control. As we continuously learn and understand, we reach a point of miraculous experience beyond description. At that moment, time seems to stop. Everything becomes empty. Nothing remains. We might hear sadhu or feel vibrations from feet to head, tears flowing and goosebumps rising because what occurs is beyond words. In that moment, it feels as if nothing remains, no self or thoughts to understand or grasp. True enlightenment carries no feeling of, I understand now, or I know everything, because the knowledge arising then is selfless, nothing to hold on to or take pride in. It's understanding that needs no validation from ego. The breaking of fetters or liberation from self-attachment happens in that moment. This knowledge isn't about academic or conventional understanding. It's knowing without attachment, perceiving everything without effort or force. For those with wisdom, when the mind returns to its original nature or true emptiness, understanding arises automatically. Everything is like this. There is nothing. This realization is profound, yet cannot be clearly explained to others. Some may only know that nothing remains, but cannot express it or teach this knowledge to others. Sometimes, when the mind returns to its natural state, no knowledge arises that can be taught or explained to others. What occurs in that moment is simply the recognition that there is nothing, and this isn't expressed in words, but is a deep experience. Some who have this experience cannot easily communicate or convey it to others. Those who have cultivated wisdom for a long time upon enlightenment can draw upon this knowledge immediately without depending on others. It's understanding that arises from the mind itself, as if the mind has accumulated this knowledge, and when the time comes, can use it naturally without effort or force. This explains why Arahants and the Buddha possessed such vast and profound knowledge they could teach, because it was knowledge arising from within, selfless knowing, not knowledge from external study or teaching, but knowledge born from long-term mental development and cultivation. When we still use effort and feel, why aren't we as skilled as the teachers? Or why aren't we as good as others? Or why do they understand more deeply than us? Do we see these thoughts arising in our mind? If we can understand that skill, knowledge, or teaching ability flows from each person's aspirations and cultivation, if they cultivate it in that way, they may be very skilled, but if we haven't cultivated similarly, we won't have those same skills. We can let things be as they are. There's no need to attach to it. If we can put down these feelings, such thoughts will no longer trouble us. If we're constantly trying to know or understand things, because we feel we don't have the constant awareness that teachers speak of when they say, knowing all the time, we doubt ourselves, asking, why can't I be aware all the time? While thinking and speaking, we see that we're thinking and speaking, but why doesn't new knowledge or insight arise to make us feel amazed or expanded? Doubt remains because we may not fully understand yet, or our wisdom isn't sufficient. Sometimes, even when doubt arises, when we recognize it and let it go, we return to emptiness. But sometimes doubt continues constantly because our wisdom isn't complete. We still understand things conventionally or worldly, yet in terms of liberation from attachment, that's already finished with nothing more arising, because it's about understanding at a level beyond all worldly doubts. When we try to be aware, try to let go, try to be aware and let go, try to understand more. Observe this trying carefully. If one can catch this, they'll understand all its aspects completely. The feelings that arise, like subtle doubts or slight hesitation, are swift and delicate movements, but don't worry about keeping up with them, because mind and mental formations work together, arising and ceasing simultaneously. Every time a thought forms, the mind recognizes that movement immediately. Understanding this is crucial. Don't try to train the mind to catch up, because the mind already works this way. We just don't understand it yet. When you begin to notice tiny movements, like the slightest hint of uncertainty that bubbles up, if you can catch this, profound understanding arises. This movement is like the source of all feelings. It's not the destination, but the starting point deep below the water's surface. If we see this point, all doubts cease, and wonder immediately appears in the heart. Those subtle efforts with underlying doubt or uncertainty are the mind trying to achieve something. Observe this movement, but don't want to observe. Let nature guide you. Listen to teachings repeatedly until they become familiar, and these movements will reveal themselves. When seeing this clearly, some might be moved to tears in amazement, while others might see it subtly but gain deep understanding. Ah, this is what the teachers were teaching. Once understood clearly, doubt vanishes and suffering unravels. This process isn't dramatic, but arises gradually from consistent listening, absorbing and observing the mind until it becomes habitual. As the mind awakens more frequently, it becomes a mind that is mindful and aware, constantly grounded in the Dharma. Such a mind understands suffering and recognizes its causes at all times. When we begin to understand, we see that awareness exists on its own. There's no need to intentionally try to be aware. Intentional effort creates attachment to the idea that I am being aware. Instead, when we simply glance or sense that awareness without trying, the mind's nature reveals itself naturally. Just as when we casually observe that awareness is present, sounds are automatically perceived by the mind. This glancing doesn't mean physical looking, but rather a light touch of awareness. No need to concentrate or strain. Simply acknowledge that knowing is happening, nothing more. When we practice this way, we understand that both thoughts and awareness naturally arise and pass together. There's no need to place special value on arising and passing, or try to see it happening. Rather, understand this is simply the way things have always been. Just recognize that all natural phenomena flow by themselves. The Buddha and the Arahants, after attaining enlightenment, dwell in a state of emptiness, clarity and purity at all times. They are never careless, not even for a fraction of a second. Yet, even in moments of apparent carelessness, they do not perceive it as carelessness, because their awakened awareness understands everything profoundly and without attachment. When we become distracted, simply understanding that there's no one who is distracted resolves everything. Distraction is just a condition, and there's no owner of it. By listening to and absorbing these teachings until the mind becomes familiar with them, the mind will eventually awaken on its own, naturally. When the mind is consistently awake, it finds joy in hearing the Dharma. Listening brings a sense of peace, clarity, and ease, a delightful experience. The teachings feel deeply resonant and never tiresome. Over time, understanding deepens until all doubts are completely resolved. For those who fully realize the Dharma, everything is let go of and set free. There is no longer any forcing or controlling. Even when the mind does not let go, It doesn't see it as a problem. Instead, it observes that this condition arises and lets it be, without ownership even over the act of not letting go. Today, I have shared wisdom to guide our hearts and minds, both in worldly and spiritual matters. I hope that after hearing this, you gain further knowledge and understanding. Now, let's spreading loving kindness. Please focus your minds as we do so. For any karma I have committed that has offended my karmic creditors, I sincerely ask for your forgiveness. Please release me from my debts and grievances. I vow not to be reborn again. This life shall be my final one. May all the merits and virtues I have accumulated be dedicated to the spirits of all beings, humans and animals alike, and to the spirits in every realm of hell. To my karmic creditors and the karmic creditors of all beings, may you all ascend to the Tavatimsa heaven, hear the true Dharma teachings, and swiftly attain enlightenment. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.